The Hellenistic Age is the last phase of the 3,000 year cultural history of the Greeks. Begun somewhere in the third millennium before Christ in the Cycladic Islands, we have come all the way to the end, in some ways, of the story of the development of Greek culture in ancient times. The dates that you see under that term Hellenistic are related to a great military leader that died in the year 323, and then the last year, 150 BC, is when the Romans arrive about the middle of the 2nd century. Both of those have C dot because it's kind of an agreed last phase, and those dates kind of earmark the beginning and the end of the last phase of development of Greek culture in antiquity. The word Greek in Greek is Hellenis. Thus, that's where the term Hellenistic Age comes from, and it is specifically referred to now as the last phase of Greek history. Alexander the Great is the name with which we start this quick survey of that last phase. He was the son of Philip II of Macedon, and that is a name, a part of Greece that we've not mentioned before. And Philip II was a warrior king, not from Athens or Sparta, but from the regions of the north of the Balkan Peninsula of Greece today, where only shepherds and wild horses were known to reside, except that in the 4th century, there arises a very powerful kingdom led by a warrior king by the name of Philip II that threatens and at the same time unites. Like a lot of the Greek city-states, he definitely establishes a significant kingdom in his time. One of the things he will do, though, is that he will not just be a brute warrior king. He will also recognize the value of what has gone on down there in the city of Athens, Greece, in the century before. The value of education, of the intellect, not just military warfare, and thus he will go and find the most important teacher he could hire for his son, Alexander the Great. Aristotle, his name we will mention, but he will be the tutor for a while in the capital of the Macedonian kingdom, Pella. He will be the tutor of the son of Philip II, and that will make truly all the difference in so many ways. The year 334 is a year in which an incredible military campaign will begin. Philip II of Macedon will be killed, assassinated by one of his bodyguards. He will not die in battle, but will die at a wedding, one of his many weddings, the last of his many weddings. And he will then, his son, Alexander, will take over for him, begin the invasion of Asia Minor. An incredible military campaign that still goes down into history, and one of the reasons for which Alexander will be dubbed the Great. There will be several major battles. I won't go into details, but the enemy to be vanquished will be the Persians. And surely we remember the Persians. Those are the ones that had tried to gobble up the Greeks. We'll come back to that. There is one major battle of Gaugamela in about the 3rd year of that 11-year campaign, which begins in 334. But the point is, Alexander the Great will be close to losing in more than one occasion, but will be able to, through military strategy and various other means, pull the rabbit out of the hat and do the unthinkable and unite Greek city-states to do to the Persians what they had tried to do a century and a half before. This is the geography of Greece, a topographical map, and there are two names that I'd like to highlight here as I kind of start back at the beginning of this story. Macedon is in the northern part of that map. Of course, Peloponnese, where Sparta was, and Achaia, where Athens is, down south in the bottom half. But up north, nothing had ever come out of there. And Pella was not known as an important Greek city at all, never mentioned before until the 4th century. And Pella in the 4th century will become the place where Aristotle tutors the greatest military commander in all of ancient Greek history. What you're looking at here is one of the mosaics from the Palace of Pella that have been found by archaeologists. Mosaics will be one of the favored way to represent values, ideas, events. Here is Alexander the Great fighting in a lion hunt, one of the ways in which they would train. Alexander will actually participate in real battles, leading the cavalry wing at the Battle of Chaeronea when he was 17 years old. So he doesn't just fight lions. He leads from the front, just like his father does, a warrior king. So one of the things that he will develop through all the battles he will be in was this insane idea that he is immortal, invincible, that he could not be defeated. His best friends, who will be tutored as well by Aristotle in the Palace of Pella and will become his generals in the campaigns to come, they will recognize this lunacy of Alexander the Great. All men are mortal, all men can be killed and wounded, and they will huddle around him and show their loyalty and their dedication to his grandiose ideas by making sure he didn't get killed in many of these campaigns. This is another view of what remains of the Palace of Pella with its beautiful mosaic floors and a reminder of the wealth to which these shepherd kings, as they used to be referred to, and now no longer by the 4th century, they will be viewed in a very different light by Corinth, Athens, Sparta, Thebes, and many other Greek city-states that had long histories, whereas Pella had been nothing up until this time. One of the most astounding discoveries in the 1970s was the tomb of Philip II, father of Alexander the Great, king of Macedon. In Vergina, a tumulus is like a man-made hill, and while ancient grave robbers knew to investigate this is a massive one, and we are fortunate enough that the tomb raiders never got under this one, and thus when it was excavated, amazing things were found down there, only a few of which I will show to give you images to associate with the Macedonian kings. This is the tomb of Philip II, king of Macedon and father of Alexander the Great. This is the entrance to the tumulus. Instead of taking the artifacts out of the underground, they actually left them there, which is great because you see them where they're supposed to be seen, unlike modern-day museums that are kind of boring and aseptic and have a little tag where you have to read where it came from. If you walk down in here, you know that you're walking into a 4th century before Christ tomb of a great Macedonian king. The degree of wealth is clear by the artifacts in here. Here is an image of Philip II, one of many. There will be some inscribed or in ivory on like a bedpost that will be found down in the tumulus. That one will have the characteristic scar across the face as Philip II received wounds in battle, leading on the front edge of his attacks and his armies. This is an image of Philip II in marble. This is the actual tomb underneath all that gigantic hill, where the specific artifacts that you're going to now see, just a few, were found. The things for him in the afterlife is weapons, food, and many other items. Please make note of the few that I will be showing you. Here are reminders of the wealth of these Macedonian kings. The city of Philippi in northern Greece, which will be important in the New Testament times and in Roman times, was the city of Philippi was established, enlarged, made wealthy by a gold mine that was found nearby, and therefore Philip II named it after himself, and that's why it's called Philippi. Here are reminders of the wealth of these Macedonian kings. Philip II on the right side, the father with the beard, and then the young son that took over for him at the age of approximately 21 to 22, when his father was assassinated. The young, charismatic, unbearded Alexander the Great is depicted in the coin to the left. These artifacts were amazingly found in the tomb of Philip II. This is the box, not bone box, but ashes box, in which the remains of Alexander the Great were found. It has, notice please on top, the 8-point Macedonian star, a symbol of Macedonian royalty. And then it has hanging above the box, gold box, a crown made out of 24-karat, easily molded gold leaf that was on the head of Alexander the Great. They burned their kings on pyres, and thus this crown will be removed before the fire is set, and then it will be put inside the box with the ashes of Philip II when the ceremony is over. Here is another image of that amazing find of the remains of the Philip II Macedonian king and the begetter of the Macedonian dynasty that will be at the head of the last phase of Greek civilization throughout the eastern part of the Mediterranean world. Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great came to power in the year 334 when his father was assassinated and brought a dream, a vision that he sold to the other Greek city-states to do to the Persians what they had tried to do to the Greeks 150 years before. You see, it was in 490 that the Persian king, first Persian king, attacked the Greek city-states, expecting to simply walk through, gobble it up, no big deal. But I'll remind you that attempt by the Persians, 11 years from 490 to 479 before Christ, failed amazingly. Two different Persian kings attempted to defeat those good-for-nothing, pesky Greek city-states that weren't even an empire or united kingdoms. They were little puny kingdoms, but whether it was the Spartans or the Athenians or whoever it was, they will find a way to defeat them. Well, now, 150 years later, Alexander the Great sells to the Greek city-states, let's go do to the Persians what they tried to do to us 150 years before. So he will begin with an army of about 35,000, a 11-year campaign from 334 to 323, and he will quickly, even though narrowly be defeated more than once, he will quickly achieve that amazing, incredible goal of getting rid of the big bad empire to the east, the Persian. The Persian Empire will actually more or less be defeated in various battles along the way, 4 years into the campaign by 330. But please notice in the map that Alexander took journeys to the south and to the Far East, way past the Persian Empire. For example, if you're looking at the map, pink is the color of the ultimate product of his campaign. He took Jerusalem and Palestine, and then he walked into Egypt, crowned himself pharaoh, and then walked back up and kept pursuing the Persians until he conquered their palaces in Susa and Persepolis And then, like the ever-ready battery, he just kept going and going and going. The pink keeps going in the right side of the map all the way to the Indus River, where no Westerner had ever been, seen elephants or like that. So when he gets to the Indus River and goes north even, that's when his army will have had enough. When he got to what we call India today, his soldiers revolted. And thus Alexander had to admit defeat, not by a foreign enemy, but by the fact that they simply said, we want to go home. How much is enough? And there's then the political and logistical nightmare. Good grief, how big is this empire that you've established? Who on earth can reign it? And that's going to be part of the equation. Alexander the Great, had he lived on, might have done other amazing things, but he died suddenly at the age of 33 approximately, in the year 323, and we don't know exactly how. Some say he died in the capital of Susa. Some say that he died of a fever along in the Gulf area. Some others say that he drowned in a river while crossing it with his amazing white stallion Bucephalus. Those are tales, or they might be history. We're not sure, but we can't confirm them. But he suddenly, the charismatic leader, disappears. And there is no man that wants to or can keep this gigantic empire together. And so his generals, 5 of his best friends that grew up with him homeschooling in the palace in Pella under Aristotle, have been his military loyal leaders for all through these campaigns. They divided up the empire because no way is this gigantic amoeba be held together politically or militarily. So that's what happens. This is the aftermath of the sudden death of Alexander the Great in the year 323. You see 5 colors, not expecting to remember the 5 generals: Cassander, Lysimachus, Antigonus, Ptolemy, and Seleucus. Notice the legend up in the left-hand corner, but you can see that one guy gets the home area of Pella, another gets Thrace, another gets Syria and Phrygia, another gets the big empire that's in the east all the way to nearly India, and another one gets Egypt. So 5 different subdivisions of that massive empire when he suddenly dies. The legacy of Alexander is a very important point to be made. Alexander ushers in the Hellenistic period, the last age phase of Greek culture in antiquity. And he had 2 armies. This is the way to view it. He had a military organization, 35,000 men, veterans, and that was only the first phase of his conquests. What Alexander understood from Aristotle and his education and his training is that you can conquer people militarily, but unless you conquer them intellectually and educationally and culturally, then you really haven't conquered them for very long. So he Hellenized the world. He spread Greek culture throughout the known world of the East. He Hellenized, made Greek, he Greekified all the eastern part of the world, because he had basically 2 armies: the military that conquered, defeated the enemy military, but then he had an army of teachers and philosophers and sculptors and goldsmiths and priests, and these conquered Asia and the East, and all the Egyptians and Palestinians and all the rest of the areas. He conquered them culturally. That is why 3 centuries later, when Christianity is born, the sacred texts of the New Testament are not going to be written in the language that Jesus preached in, that is Aramaic or Hebrew. They're going to be written in Greek, because all of that eastern part of the world will speak Greek, something that the Romans will recognize when they conquer this area, and they will not attempt to make their language, Latin, the language of the world because Greek already is. It's the common language of the eastern part of the world. And this goes to the credit of Alexander the Great and his military campaign, which had a more important feature, the cultural campaign. He will actually perform marriages of his veteran Greek soldiers, 10,000 at a time, to Asian women. That is, he will not fear the mixing of Greek culture with Asian culture. He will actually be much in favor of it because he believes in the superiority, in the sophistication of Greek culture, which of course he learned from Aristotle and the Greek philosophers. He wasn't just a brute military commander. Greek language became the common language of the eastern part of the world. Everybody still spoke their own language, but they also learned Greek because Alexander had made it possible and advantageous. He fostered the model of the Greek city-state, the polis, in the eastern part of the world. And although they're going to be under kings, monarchies are going to be still the thing. They're going to be fashioned politically as independent Greek city-states under a king, so to speak, and that's going to be another Greek thing that is going to be exported to the East and to Asia. But beyond that, more importantly, is Greek art, Greek architecture, Greek dramas, stories of Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides told on the theater, the Greek gods, Greek values for right and for wrong, for good or for bad, Greek ideas, they all spread throughout this part of the world significantly, so that you will find Greek temples all the way on the Black Sea in what we call Russia or Armenia or many other places far away from Pella or Athens, and to this day you will still find traces of that incredible colonization of Greek culture throughout all of this eastern part of the world. One couple of notes of the 5 generals, 5 Greek monarchies that will divvy up the Alexander the Great's empire. The Seleucids and the Ptolemies are probably the most important to the stories as we go on. I will remind you that Cleopatra was the last pharaoh of Egypt, intelligent, smart, last pharaoh of Egypt, will commit suicide, and she actually was not Egyptian. She was a descendant of Ptolemy, one of the Greek generals of Alexander the Great, from 2.5 centuries before. So Cleopatra will be the last pharaoh of Egypt, will know Egyptian hieroglyphics, read and write, but she will not ultimately be fully Egyptian. She's actually a descendant of one of those Greek kings. Some last items about the legacy. If I call the last period of Greek culture a period of decay, of phase down, I don't want to underestimate important developments that happen still in Greek culture in this last phase, besides the Hellenization of the Eastern world. In the area of science, so much is owed by those that will come later in the areas of astronomy. Aristarchus of Samos is just one of many names. Remember, they didn't have GPSs in ancient times, so mariners, sailors would base their position on the waters based upon the stars. And that is just one of many ways in which the discipline of astronomy was very important to ancient culture. Geography, of course, Eratosthenes will be one important name there in mapping out the land. Astronomy, in a sense, maps out the heavens so you can know where you are on the earth, but geography maps out the land that you live on. Geometry, a very important discipline, with Euclid and Archimedes of Syracuse, will be important figures in the development of the measuring of land and the science of geometry as a whole. Maybe as important as any of those first three as the area of medicine. It will be the Greeks that will get the credit for founding medical schools that are very important in the as the story of Western tradition continues. The word Asklepeion was the name for a Greek hospital, and it was associated with the son of Apollo, Asclepius, who was seen as a god of healing, one of several gods of healing, but the main one. They practiced holistic medicine, meaning they mixed religion, pagan religion, with actual medicinals, surgeries, and other things like psychological healing as well. The medical schools of the time will be very important centers for the development, discoveries of medicinals and surgeries that will aid the human condition when it needs it. We still have to this day leftovers of this important Greek function in the development of medicine, as some doctors still take the Hippocratic Oath, an oath that there's a statement comes down from the 4th century before Christ, associated with Hippocrates, a Greek medical doctor and teacher, and that swear, one of the components of which is to swear that you will never do harm to a human being. Of course, philosophy is a major Greek thing that will come down from before the 4th century, originates even before that in the 6th century before Christ. But in the Hellenistic era, the names of Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle are very important, and a couple of important heirs that I want to quickly look at as we finish this look at the Hellenistic Age. Socrates is a very important figure. He will fight in the Peloponnesian War, be a war veteran, but will be a philosopher, that is, a lover of wisdom, teacher, journalist, critic of society. And for that reason, because he speaks his mind and he teaches it to the young, he will be put on trial in the year 399 before Christ in Athens and will be condemned to death, will take poison, hemlock, and will die because of what he taught. What he taught was to the Athenian youth, you need to do better than your parents. The Athenians have lost their way. He, of course, was right, but that didn't make him any less unpopular. And he is an important figure of philosophy of 399. His pupil, by the name of Plato, will be in absolute tears and mourning by his side when he takes that hemlock in the year 399. Plato is an important pupil of Socrates and a founder of the school of philosophy that he teaches called the Academy. And if you continue one more generation down in Athens, the important school of philosophy called the Lyceum will be established by the pupil of Plato by the name of Aristotle. So important figures in Greece in the last phase of their culture. Now the Epicureanism and Epicureans and what will follow next, the Stoics, are important last phases of Greek culture coming into the time of Christ. Epicureanism was a philosophy taught by Epicurus, another Greek, in the beginning of the 3rd century before Christ. What's interesting about those philosophy schools, while they were not atheists, so to speak, they will be more secular. They will not advocate important roles to the pagan gods in the pursuit of wisdom and how to live here on earth. They will not see the mythologies and the gods as an important role. So they're, in a sense, an alternative to pagan gods, although they will not be anti-pagan religions. The Epicureans go down as having advocated pursuit of pleasure, but sometimes that is misunderstood. It's not really that they were preaching hedonism, satisfy every desire you want in it, whatever way you want to. It's more a case of pursue freedom from your desires and feelings, especially freedom from worry and freedom from emotional turmoil. That is more what they meant by pursuit of pleasure. They will not be in favor of strong involvement with politics, because politics have been in conflict and crisis. Athens versus Sparta have been the reason for much of the turmoil and downfall of Greek culture, and that's why they're going to not be encouraging heavy involvement in their teaching. The Stoics, which were the second major philosophy school in the 3rd, 2nd, and 1st century before Christ as the Romans arrive, the Stoics will be the most popular by the time when the Romans arrive. Zeno is the founder. He will simplistically say that happiness is to be found in virtue. And of course, then you would have to spend time asking Zeno, now what does virtue mean? What is virtuous? What are the best things to do? What are the things to avoid? And he will teach on those. But the most, quick survey like ours, the most important thing about Stoicism is that it teaches that you cannot control small things and big things in life, and therefore it behooves you to accept whatever comes. That is your attitude towards the small things and the large things. Don't sweat it. If you can't control it, then why lament it? Why be unhappy and critical and if you cannot control it? Accept whatever comes in life. One thing that they will do to differ with the Epicureans will be to strongly encourage public service as noble, be involved in the political life of the city, and therefore a very different view. This is one of the reasons probably why when the Romans conquered the Greeks, they will be, some of them, very attracted to Stoic philosophy, so to speak. Well, one last thing. Was the last phase of Greek culture a case of corruption, stagnation of Greek culture, or was it a period of great vitality? Well, it was both. Clearly, Athens will never recover from its classical period, that amazing moment in time. But that is as much as can be said. Great names, great philosophers, great developments. Alexander the Great, amazing developments, but it is the last phase of Greek culture. It will have some political stability under Greek kings, Macedonian kings, but the lingering problems that brought it to crash in the Athens versus Sparta wars are still lingering. It is not going to be able to withstand the Romans. That's the point. They were able to stand up to the Persians when they tried to gobble them up in the 5th century before Christ. But when the Romans come in 150 BC, that will be the end.